And good Monday morning. My name is Ryan Belmore. I'm the owner and publisher of What's Up Newp, and my dear friend Frank Prosnitz joins me. Frank, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Ryan. How are you?
Good. We are continuing our conversation on hopefully what many people know about the March 2nd special election, and we carry that today. And just pulled up the Secretary of State's website. Right now, you can vote at your local city or town hall during normal business hours, and that goes all the way up till March 1st before you can vote in person on March 2nd. You can also, let's see here, there have been 2,433 people who have already early voted across the state, and there have been 90,150 mail ballots sent out. So make sure you get those returned on time. And there have already been 31,000 of those returns back to the Secretary of State's website.
Good.
So we have been crossing off. We did question 7. We talked last week with Seth Magaziner, State Treasurer, about overall all of the questions. What are we doing today there?
We're going to talk about affordable housing. There's a $65 million bond. It's question number 3, and that's for affordable housing development. It's an area that we have not invested very well in Rhode Island. And Brenda Clement, who is the executive director of HousingWorks RI, is going to join us this morning and going to explain a little bit of why this is such an important bond issue.
Good morning. Glad to be with you today.
Good to have you, Brenda. How are you this morning?
Doing well. It's Monday.
It is Monday. Great observation. You make everybody, when they come into the office, declare what day it is.
Only on Mondays.
Maybe a good place to start is telling people what HousingWorks RI is all about.
Sure. HousingWorks is a research and policy organization that looks at all things housing and its connectedness to both economic opportunity in our state and growing economic opportunity, but also how to improve health outcomes and to help educational attainment and achievement in our students and in our school systems as well. We are housed at Roger Williams University at the Providence campus, and we try to, again, through our research and policy, try to make the case as to why housing and housing investment makes sense.
So why does it make sense? Why is it important to be able to promote affordable housing?
Well, for a number of reasons, is that there's huge demand and need for it. Right now, our annual fact book shows that more than a third, or about approximately 146,000 Rhode Island households, are considered cost burden, meaning they're spending more than a third of their income on housing. And so what does that mean? Well, at the higher income level, that may mean that, you defer going on a vacation, or you don't put as much into savings, or you don't buy a new car. But as you go further down the economic spectrum, those choices become much more dire. You have to choose between food and rent. You have to choose between filling a prescription and paying your rent. You have to not pay rent and run the risk of eviction or displacement from your house. So we need more. We know many of those workers at the lower income levels are what we have categorized during this pandemic as essential and critical workers, and they struggle to keep a roof over their head.
And that number of individuals who are cost burden is growing during this pandemic and is getting older, correct?
That's correct on both counts. No surprise, I guess, when we know the huge uptick in unemployment and unemployment benefits that we've seen in the state as a result of the pandemic. So more and more people, unfortunately, have joined the ranks of housing insecure. And it's not just renters, it's also homeowners and people who are at risk of losing their homes to foreclosure because they're not able to pay their mortgage anymore. Simply, because they've lost their job or that their income has been substantially reduced.
Other than compassion and wanting to help people, why should somebody care about making sure that people are able to afford their housing?
So for a number of reasons, like I said, these are workers who are providing critical resources to our community. They're childcare workers, nurses' aides, retail workers, people who are delivering all of your Amazon packages, and a whole host of other individuals who are providing critical support and jobs and services in our community during this pandemic, but before. Particularly important if you're a senior who wants to try to age in place and age in your community. Many of these workers who provide necessary supports for you are folks that cannot live comfortably anywhere in our state as well. And it also, keeps property taxes on the tax roll when workers are not spending too much on, and so it keeps a local property tax system in place. It also provides support for local businesses and local communities. And when people have income to spend, they can support the local restaurant, they can support the local store, and so forth. So there's lots of reasons and lots of ripple effects that we see from housing and housing investment.
What kind of an income does it take to be able to purchase a home or rent an apartment that makes it affordable, that you're not paying out more than 30% of your housing for housing?
So I'm sad to say that in nowhere in Rhode Island and none of our 39 cities and towns can you affordably rent if you're the median renter income, and that income is about $34,255 to be exact. And there is only one municipality where the median household income of $63,296 will allow you to affordably buy, and that's currently Central Falls. And the other kind of part of the problem, so housing's been a problem for a long time, and you've covered our annual fact book release for a number of years in numerous capacities. So this has been a long-standing, persistent problem even before the pandemic. But we just haven't been producing housing at enough of a rate to even meet just current demand, never mind growth. And so we see prices go up because of that, but also inventory is at extremely low levels. Our rental vacancy rate is at a 3 to 4% rate. A healthier vacancy rate is 6 to 7%. If you've tried to go into the home buying market, you know that it is a seller's market and a very hot market as well too, with lots of competition and lots of houses going, within hours, if not days, when they're listed on the multi-list.
And very hard for someone to compete who's not on a higher income level. I think I read somewhere where the affordable living wage and minimum wage are entirely different things. Where I saw the affordable living wage in Rhode Island is about $53,000 a year, and much of that tied to housing costs.
Yep. Exactly. And then, the further and further away that you have to get from your job to be able to find housing that you can afford also adds your transportation costs, adds childcare costs, all of those other things that you need to do in order to stay in a job as well too. So it's a struggle. We've seen renter housing cost burdens increase from 5 to 28% across all income categories. So another good reason why you should all care is because either you're impacted by it or somebody in your family or somebody that you know is likely impacted by this issue.
So the greatest deterrent to homelessness, I presume, is affordable housing?
It's not rocket science, right? And we have study after study that shows that when we can provide people housing first and then wrap around the services that they need in order to address the issues that cause them to get into homelessness, we know we can solve the problem and we can keep people safely housed and keep them safely housed for years and keep them out of expensive institutional settings and have much better outcomes for that individual as well. So yes, more housing and more housing housing with appropriate services. We also know that that's the key to helping people age in place and age in community. Many seniors want to stay in their community and not move into a congregate setting like a nursing home or other places. And so in order to do that, though, you need appropriate services and support. And many of those services are given and offered to low-wage work by low-wage workers.
So Rhode Island is last in New England in the amount of money that it provides for affordable housing projects.
It is true. We've been in that last place for a long time. Other states, and this is looking at a per capita investment, obviously, to make it comparing a little bit more of apples to apples. In 2008, Rhode Island invested only $22 per capita towards housing, far lower than our neighbors in Massachusetts that invest about $101 per capita, and Connecticut, which invests $96 per capita. And that's actually still a misnomer because that counts the 2016 housing bond funds that voters approved in 2016, and we have pretty much spent all of that bond funds down, and so we're kind of back closer to about $5 per capita again. But even at that $22 per capita, even Maine beat us in terms of their investment in housing from their state budget.
So is 65 million enough?
It's not, but it's a great start. And it's what I'm characterizing as a down payment on the investment. It will continue to help us leverage other federal programs and federal dollars as well. This will actually be the fourth housing bond that we've asked voters to approve, and thankfully voters have approved all of the others dating back from 2006. And all of those funds in the past bonds have helped us create or preserve over 3,200 affordable homes in 34 out of the 39 cities and towns. So it's a great investment and a great start. We are going to need a continued and consistent investment, and we're also hopeful that the legislature will act on a dedicated funding stream legislation this year too, to keep pumping and putting fuel in the tank for us to create more housing.
So if approved, how will this money be used?
So it will go through similar process from past bonds. It's administered through a partnership with a state agency called the Office of Housing and Community Development and the Housing Resources Commission and Rhode Island Housing. And it's a competitive process. Applicants can apply, nonprofit developers, for-profit developers, other nonprofits in cities and towns can apply for the funds for a specific project. It then goes through a review process, obviously, and then funds are awarded for the project to start construction.
Pretty evenly divided around the state, or just depending upon projects?
It depends, it kind of depends on what comes in as well too. The bulk of the projects in past bonds have been rental housing as opposed to homeownership. And again, that's just a reflection of the types of projects that come in, but we hope that there'll be a few more homeownership opportunities coming in as well to the cycle. But yep, as I said, the geography of them, while many of them are concentrated in the core cities, we've made it a real effort to try to spread the bond funds across the state and try to help all the communities get closer to the 10% goal.
So I think it's been 5 years since the last housing bond. Is that what you look at the duration for this, that this will provide enough funds for the next 5 years, or do you think we'll be going back to the well a little bit quicker?
Well, again, so yes, the last bond was 2016, and this is also a 5-year bond as well too, or can be floated over a period of 5 years. We're actually hopeful that the next governor will kind of front load the bond a little bit more so we can get some more money out the door as well too. As I said, the real source is not continually to go to voters for housing bonds, because that's somewhat of an unpredictable way of funding and financing affordable housing development in particular. So we're really hopeful that the legislature will pass a dedicated funding stream in the state budget so that we have a consistent source of funding and money each year for the production of housing.
What kind of money would you look like on a regular basis, or will you look for on a regular basis for this dedicated funding stream?
So ideally, we'd like a source that that puts off about 10 to 12 million per year. Again, that's it takes a while to pull together projects and local permits and zoning requirements and other things. So it takes from start to finish at least a couple of years to assemble all of those pieces. And so we feel that with the current capacity and also increasing the capacity in the system, we could spend down that money, use that money to leverage other federal dollars and resources. The past bonds have leveraged over $650 million in additional investment from both public and private sources.
How would you see that 10 to 12 million funded?
One of the proposals that is being introduced is to look at an increase in real estate conveyance tax on properties over 500,000. We could also look at different ways to divide up the real estate conveyance tax that's currently in place as well too. Many other states, and Rhode Island, by the way, is one of the few states in the Northeast that does not have a dedicated funding stream in their state budget or a steady source of income in their state budget towards housing production, and many other states that do use at least part of or a portion of the conveyance tax.
So the need for affordable housing has not been a mystery by any means. Why is it that we are so far behind other states?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that we've put some of the mechanisms in place, including, the creation of the Low Mod Housing Act a number of years back now that set a goal of 10% for every community to reach for their affordable housing. Only 6 out of Rhode Island 39 communities currently reach that goal.
Including Newport, correct?
That's correct. But I think we've never put the teeth behind that act, and we've never provided the resources to the communities, particularly around planning, to help us get towards those goals. And, I'm also been doing this for a while. I know that affordable housing has some image problems, right? People don't necessarily welcome it into their community. They think projects, they think big, ugly developments that won't fit into their community. I am proud to say that, all the fund, I would be happy to show you any one of the projects that we've developed over the last 20 to 30 years with bond funds and other programs. And these are assets to the community. But then the other underlying issue and concern is kind of the racism and classism. We don't want those people in our community. We don't want more of those kids in our school system. And so those are harder conversations that we need to have in a community and show that we are a welcoming community that provides all kinds of options for all kinds of people.
So often when we look at these projects that are being built, that a developer may come to a community with, they're not 100% affordable housing. It's usually a mix, so that you have really the same kind of housing, just different levels of rent, or maybe different costs, but it's the same housing.
And to me, that's a good thing. Providing mixed income and mixed types of communities is essentially what most of our communities are, right? If you look at iconic villages, if you look at mill villages throughout the state, you have all kinds of different levels of housing surrounding the job center. And that creates healthy and vibrant neighborhoods and communities. We just need to make sure we're doing that everywhere and providing opportunity for everybody, particularly focusing on those most in need, which currently are the lowest wage workers.
What are the consequences if the bond fails?
I don't like to think those unpleasant thoughts, but if it does, then we've got more work to do at the legislature to try to provide a dedicated funding stream. We're going to have to be creative in trying to figure out how to find more resources for the building and developing of housing as well too. I'm confident. This is a weird election. We've never done this type of election for just bonds alone, and also doing it essentially virtually or during a pandemic. So I don't know. But in general, in the past, Rhode Island voters have approved bonds pretty consistently. And so we're hopeful and optimistic.
One of the things that I find that's not talked about a whole lot, first of all, a lot of these bonds are not being talked about a whole lot as we go through this process. We're not talking about the job development on a short-term basis and a long-term basis.
Yep.
Certainly the affordable housing bond is going to create construction jobs.
Well, exactly. And the last bonds produced over 4,000 jobs in construction activity. And then, as you said, they produce a certain amount of jobs post-construction as well, too. The biggest bump up in jobs is obviously on construction. But we're also seeing somebody has to manage that property afterwards. Somebody has to cut the lawn and mow and shovel the snow and do all of those other things that you need to do to manage the properties as well too. And so there's some ongoing jobs in that category, and those are good jobs. We also use a lot of the construction and development of affordable housing to partner with job training programs and workforce development programs. So not only are you creating construction jobs, but you're also creating learning opportunities for people to get into trades positions as well too. So it's a win-win-win in my head on multiple fronts.
I also think you've mentioned in the past that there's a tie-in between question number 3, the $65 million affordable housing development bond, and question number 5, the $15 million bond for early childhood facilities.
Right. I mean, again, we know that childcare and childcare facilities and good quality childcare facilities are also lacking in the state. And so the need to increase them, we've seen more and more interest, particularly in affordable developments, in large parts through lots of our partnership with our partner LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporation, to include childcare centers and childcare sites on the site of affordable developments. We have a couple underway. We have a great example of one that's been up and running in Woonsocket for a long period of time. It just makes natural sense to be helping workers, particularly lower wage workers, to be able to go out to their job every day, to have a safe place to leave their children, and also have a safe place to come home at night.
Brenda, I've been thinking, which is always a dangerous thing for me. But I've watched this develop, and I, when there are general officers or when there are actual races that are involved with these elections, I think we have a lot more involvement, a lot more discussion of these things. I know that the general treasurer, Seth Magaziner, is out there promoting the bonds. I know that Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea is out there promoting people to vote and get out for the election. I haven't heard, maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't heard a whole lot from Governor Raimondo or the Lieutenant Governor, Dan McKee, who will soon become governor, to come out and say that they support these bonds. Am I missing something?
I don't think you're missing something. I mean, to be fair, both of them are pretty busy with lots of other things going on, and including continuing to manage the pandemic. The governor obviously included the housing bonds in her budget, and upped the amount of the housing bond this summer in her revised budget. So we're certainly grateful to that. The lieutenant governor, in his role as lieutenant governor, has always been supportive of past housing bonds and initiatives, and so we're hopeful and assuming that will continue once he moves up to the governor chair as well too. So, but I'm always happy to have people be talking, and would love for both of them to weigh in about the importance of these investments.
I just think I just think leadership says that it doesn't take a lot of time to spend 5 minutes and tell people that you're in favor of the bonds or not, so that they see the direction of their elected leaders. That's my editorial stance.
Brenda, I have a question, and I'm not sure where it's going to make sense or how it's going to come out, but here in Newport, we have seen, across Rhode Island, there have been recent reports where as high as 30% of the houses sold over the last year were sold to out-of-staters. We see more and more homes in communities along the coast in Newport get turned into short-term rentals, Airbnbs. Their rents are going up. Their seasonal rents, winter, summer. People who want to work in Newport can't afford to live in Newport, or Westerly or wherever it may be. what can people do, or what can communities do to kind of make sure that they still have a place to live in these communities?
Yeah, in fact, this a similar kind of question came up on another bond event that I was doing on Friday with that was sponsored by the Newport Hes and some of your local council members as well too. Again, this issue was a big issue even before pandemic, but we are seeing an uptick. We're trying to get a sense as to the data as to how much of an uptick we're seeing of purchasing of properties from outside. We've always seen pressure from both Boston and Connecticut in our market, because of their tightness of their market as well too. And so this again isn't overly new. I mean, I think a lot of what Newport and other communities have done to look at how you're trying to increase the production and control over properties, trying to put some of buying up some affordable units and keeping them in a land trust model. You have one of the premier nonprofits in your area, Church Community Housing Corporation, that has done this work regularly over a long period of time. And so working with communities to kind of acquire properties so that you always have some of those starter homes. I think particularly with Airbnb, I know the Newport Council and others have looked at how you tax those properties as well too. And if you're essentially running your home as a business, should you be taxed at a commercial rate as opposed to a residential rate, or some hybrid model in between? And I think those are all issues that need further discussion at the local level, because it does look like at least that may be one of the longer term impacts of the pandemic, is that we will see this in our some areas and neighborhoods in Rhode Island, in Newport area, but also South County and other places, even Providence, we're seeing it as well too.
Yeah, it's there's houses. I just recently purchased a house and I'm in state, but houses are already hitting the market that sold while we were looking for $100,000 more.
Wow.
It's just remarkable. I was in City Hall when Newport City Council discussed adding conveyance tax, and every single realtor in Rhode Island showed up and spoke out against it. How do we move forward with something like that gives back to make sure there is affordable?
So first of all, I would, point out that conveyance tax on most deals is a pretty small percentage of the deal. If you just recently purchased, you probably, as you sat, I don't know if you did it virtually or what, but as you sat signing your life away, that there's all kinds of fees, all kinds of little things that get added at the end of that. So it's not necessarily something that makes and breaks a deal. And we've made the proposal to exempt properties under $500,000 to try to address anything that's affordable. But as you point out, the higher end market has done pretty darn well during the pandemic, and has been consistently strong as well too. So if there's a better source of funding to provide a dedicated funding stream, I'm happy to have that conversation. But the best tool that most other states and most other places have found is the conveyance tax. But I will say the realtors we work very closely with, our board chair is a realtor, and so we try to find common ways and common ground on all of these issues as well too. And the association and others, I believe, are putting forward some alternatives as well too, which we're happy to discuss. But I will say that across the country, the realtors have started to become a little bit more willing to talk about that, and a little bit more willing to find some common ground.
And Frank, I'm just going to go for a quick threefer here,
okay,
and then I'll get back to you. But Gwendolyn writes in and says, my daughter has been looking for an apartment that will take Section 8 for several months. No luck, landlords won't take it. Obviously, it goes hand in hand with the conversation we're having. How that Section 8 housing, and what advice do you have, or what can communities, or what can we all do?
So one of the things that we're really close this year, we're hoping to be able to put it over the top, is one of the things that we are trying to do is pass the source of income legislation that would allow would not allow landlords to discriminate against a tenant based on their legal source of income, like a Section 8 voucher. We know, again, because of all of our image issues around affordability, that landlords, and we see it regularly even in Craigslist ads and other things, people still post no Section 8 allowed. And it's in part, because they don't understand the ease of the program as well too, but the fact that they as a landlord get guaranteed rent, or at least guaranteed 2/3 of their rent as well too under these federal programs. It has passed the Senate for several years. We're hopeful and optimistic that we'll finally be able to get it past the House this year. It's actually scheduled for a vote later this week. And so we have some optimism on that front. Part of it too is that not only are we seeing discriminatory practices with landlords around vouchers and other legal forms of income as well too, but also just because, again, we don't have the supply. Landlords have lots of choices. So it's the vouchers are capped at a fair market rent, but many landlords can get it even above that fair market rent in a very tight market. So it's not so much that they're discriminating all the time against their source of income, although that happens a lot, but it's also that they can just get more income without having to participate in those programs. So what's the solution? Increase the supply, right? I mean, it's basic economics. If supply increases, prices will go down.
Brenda, I wanted to go back a little bit to the legislation that requires communities to have 10% of the housing that's affordable, and the fact that we only have 6 of our communities that have been able to do that. You mentioned about it, that the legislation lacks teeth. What could we do to strengthen it? And the second part of my question is, I believe it was a few years ago that the State House of Representatives had a committee to take a look at that. And the biggest thing they were able to do was to extend the time for the committee without coming up with any conclusions. And what I heard from a lot of people was that what they were exploring were not things that would actually get communities to the 10%, but would change the formula that would make it easier for them to reach that without actually adding housing.
Right. And you're absolutely right. We didn't come to any major concession, any major conclusions with that commission. There is some interest in both the House and the Senate in trying to revise that, but and do more than nibble around the edges, try to make some real substantive changes. The first thing I would add is more carrots to the mix for communities, and live up to some of the promises in the original act that we never did, and that's providing more planning support, more support for communities to evaluate projects as they come in their door as well too, more funds to potentially acquire properties or use local properties as well too. So that's one tool, but then also, I think you have to also say, okay, and another carrot would be a bump up in the education formula. Many communities, in theory, oppose family developments or larger nonprofit developments because they fear that it will increase the number of kids in their school. School age population, actually, it's been on a decline across the state and really across the region for a while. School costs, however, have continued to go up. So it's not really number of students that are increasing costs of school. But okay, if we think that's an issue, let's give a bump up in the school aid formula. And there is a bill currently in the Senate that would allow that to happen as well too. So, and then, okay, if you're still not working with us, then we've got to start to get a little harder and say you don't get as much open space money, you don't get as much transportation money, or other things that communities may want to have if you don't start to make progress towards your goals as well too. Now, in some cases, 10% may not be a realistic goal for every community. Maybe it's some sort of a regional version and a hybrid, but let's talk about that. But everybody's got some area in their community or some local owned property that they can use to potentially create some more housing. So let's find those opportunities and get going on them.
And just a quick statement: you get a more affordable housing often means more skilled workers in your community, and so that it goes hand in hand with your economy.
That's right. And, and again, particularly for people who want to stay in their community and maybe getting a little bit older, having workers who are going to support you doing that near your community is going to be critical as well too. And, every community has older individuals, every community has retail jobs or seasonal jobs or other things that they need younger workers for.
Brenda, there is a wealth of information on your website. Can you tell people what that is?
Sure. Just go to www.HousingWorksRI.org. And lots of our annual fact book is there, in addition to a number of reports and issue briefs that we put out on a regular basis. We also have a very interesting project that we did in partnership with Roger Williams architectural students around accessory dwelling units, which is also a tool that is underutilized in our state that we're hoping to be able to utilize more to help people create accessory dwelling units to increase the stock of housing in communities as well. Not necessarily all affordable, but it will also just help increase the supply.
Brenda, to quote my friend Ryan Belmore, is there anything we missed?
I don't think so. I think you guys asked all the questions or told about all things. But, you've heard me say this before, Frank, and Ryan too, I think. But housing advocates like me say all the time, the path to economic opportunity begins at your front door. And nothing works right in your life if you don't have that safe and decent place to get up from every day and to go to every night. Over 2,700 Rhode Island men, women, and children experienced homelessness in the last couple of years. That's 2,700, way too many in my head.
No, certainly. So a vote yes on question 3. Vote yes on, all the questions. Look carefully at. It's a lot of economic development, a lot of things that'll move the state forward. We have, Ryan and I certainly over the last number of years have had a passion for affordable housing, and we believe that is incredibly important in the state. And we couldn't urge people more, to vote yes on question number 3 and yes on question number 5. And I'm going to vote yes on all of them. But
my mother already turned her ballot in and did the same. So
excellent.
That's one.
Yeah, I went and voted, I guess 2 Fridays ago now, early at my town hall, easy as can be. If people have the time between now and March 1st, so what are we? We are a week away from. Yeah, this is your last full week, and then you can go on Monday or you can go on Tuesday. Vote.ri.gov. You can find out where your polling place is, polling hours, see your sample ballot, read more about these bond items. Recommend everybody do so.
I agree. And I think that's one of the good lessons that we've learned from the pandemic is that offering various ways for voters to vote is a good thing that I hope we continue to do even past this.
I agree. Thank you very much, Brenda.
Brenda, thank you.
Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you for all that your organization does, because I think it's really critical in Rhode Island, the things that you're able to do, and is a real wake-up call for communities when they look at your fact book to let them know where they're at.
Thank you. And we're happy to work in partnership with a number of our housing advocates. And we're part of a group called Homes RI, which is working a lot on advocacy issues on a lot of the things that we talked about. But I appreciate the opportunity to join you today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. All right, Mr. Prosnitz. And I think that concludes our look at the bond items, does it not?
So far, another author tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, we're back at our author series tomorrow. And a whole bunch of great interviews coming up. And, if you missed any portion of this interview, you can catch it on whatsupnewp.com. It is available there on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel. You can share with folks that you know who say, hey, I don't need to go vote, or maybe are against all of the bond items. Share with them some of these live interviews.
Very good.
All right, Mr. Prosnitz, stick around for a couple minutes here.
Sure.
And I'll be right there with you. We want to thank Brenda for joining us today, and we appreciate it. You can find out more information, vote.ri.gov. You can see your sample ballot as well as find out where you can vote. Thanks for watching.